Analytical geometry. In this video, we are going to learn how to determine the midpoint of a line. So if you have a line, a midpoint of a line simply represent the center of the line. So the midpoint, it is going to be a point that cuts a line into equal parts. So let's say, for example, we have the point here to be point A and the point here to be point B. So the midpoint will be at the center, and therefore the length of AM will be the same as the length of MB. So that is what is called the midpoint. So now, if you want to determine the midpoint coordinates of a point, you are supposed to have the coordinates of the starting point and the finishing point for you to be able to determine the coordinates of the midpoint. Let's say, for example, the coordinate of A is -2:3, and the coordinate of B is 3:4. So for you to be able to get the coordinates of the midpoint, you are going to use what is called the midpoint equation. So the midpoint equation is given as midpoint of whatever point is x1 plus x2 all divided by 2 is to y1 plus y2 all divided by 2. So this expression here will help us to determine the coordinate of the midpoint. So, but now remember, the first step that you do is to label your points. So you're going to say this point A here is going to be our point 1. Therefore, we have x1, y1, and then we have x2, y2, because the B will be our point 2. So to get the midpoint, we are going to substitute now the coordinates. So remember, the x1 is -2 and the x2 is 3. Then we divide this by 2, and then we say that the y1 is 3 and the y2 is 4. Then we divide this by 2. So the coordinate of the midpoint, it is going to be how much? We are going to say -2 plus 3 all divided by 2 is going to give us half. So it's going to be 1/2. And then now we're going to look at this point here. So we're going to have 3 plus 4 all divided by 2, which will give us 7/2. So this will be the coordinates of the midpoint. So the midpoint is going to have the x value of 1/2 and the y value of 7/2. Let's say, for example, we have the following line. So this line is BD, and the coordinates of B is 2:4, and then we have D here to be 6:3. Can you please pause the video and find the midpoint of BD? So the midpoint of BD, it is going to be a point that is at the center of what? Of the line BD. So for us to determine the midpoint, we're going to use the midpoint expression, which says x1 plus x2 all divided by 2 is to y1 plus y2 all divided by 2. And then we are going to label our points. Remember, you can label any way you want. So you can say point D is your point 1. Therefore, this is your x1, your y1. This will be your x2. This will be your y2. So the labeling, you can label how you want. It's not going to be a problem. So now the midpoint that we have, we're going to say the x1 the x1 is going to be 6 plus the x2 is going to be what? It's going to be 2, all divided by 2. So the y1 is 3 plus the y2 is negative 4, all divided by 2. So if we put the first part into the calculator, which is 6 plus 2, it's going to give us 8 divided by 2. Therefore, you're going to get 8 over 2, which is going to be 4. And then now, if we look at the second part here, we are having 3 minus 4, which is going to be negative 1, all divided by 2. So this is going to be negative 1 over 2. So the coordinates of the midpoint of BD is going to be 4 is to negative 1 over 2. So that is how you get the midpoint. So but now, the problem will arise. For example, it says that, let's say you have a particular line. So this line here is line BD. And then now we have the coordinates of B to be 2 is to minus 4. And then we also know the coordinates of the midpoint. Let's say now they say this point here is point M, and it's having the coordinates 4 is to negative 2. And they say now the coordinates of D is X and Y. So the question wants you to determine the value of X and Y. So for you to be able to determine the value of X and Y, if you have the midpoint and the one coordinate, you are going to use the same approach. So remember now, on the equation of the midpoint equation is given as X is to Y. But now we know that the value of X is given as X1 plus X2 over 2. And the value of Y is given as Y1 plus Y2 over 2. So therefore, the value of X of the midpoint is the same thing as X1 plus X2 all over 2. So you're going to write that equation to say now, to find the value of X here, we're going to use the X equation of the midpoint, which is X equals to X1 plus X2 over 2. But now this X is the X of the midpoint. And then the other X are the X of what? Of the points. So we're going to label our point to say this is our point 1. Therefore, this is X1. This is Y1. This is our X2. This is our Y2. So we already have what? The value of what? Of the X of the midpoint. The X of the midpoint is 4. So we are going to substitute 4 as our X value of the midpoint. But now the X1 is 2. So we're going to put 2 there. And the X2 is X. So we're just going to put the X, what we are looking for, all divided by 2. So for us to be able to solve for the value of X, we can just cross multiply to say 2 will multiply with 4. And then we're going to have 8. And then 1 will multiply with 2 plus X, which is going to be 2 plus X. And therefore, the value of X is just going to be 8 minus 2 if we put 2 to the other side. So the value of X will be 6. So now, if you want to find the value of Y, we are going to also use the very same approach to say that the Y of the midpoint is equivalent to Y1 plus Y2 all divided by 2. And the Y value of the midpoint is negative X. I mean negative half. So you're going to say the Y value is negative 1 over 2. And the Y1, the value of the Y1 is negative 4. The value of the Y2 is Y. Then this is all divided by 2. So for us to be able to solve for the value of Y, we are going to cross multiply. So you can cross multiply or you can multiply everything else by 2. So in this case, I'm going to say this multiply by 2 and this side multiply by 2. So because this will cancel this and this will cancel that. But remember, your approach of solving for x can differ. So now we are going to have what? -1 equal -4 plus y. So now if we want to get the value of y, we'll put the 4 to the other side. So this will be y equals to -1. Then if the 4 moves to the other side, it's going to be plus 4. And therefore, the value of y, it is going to be positive 3. So we find that the coordinates of what? Of the point D, it is going to be the x value is 6 and the y value is 3. So remember this condition or this problem, we took it from what we already had, the coordinates of D. So let's verify to check that the coordinates of D was 6 and 3. So we can clearly see that this is correct, because now the coordinates of D is 6 is to 3, and we also got 6 is to 3. So that is how you are going to find what? The coordinates of the other point if you have the midpoint. And that is all for this video. Thank you very much.